During this part of the video, I will be bootstrapping my personal development environment that uses Lazy. I will be no different when I look at my plugins or startup versus anybody else's. So I'm going to go through the basic same steps. In later videos, I'll get into more detail on how and why I customize my environment the way I do. So you notice when it starts up, we get your basic, Lazy Vim startup, nice color screens. You don't see a whole lot going on in the upper right hand or lower right hand corner of my screen. That's where I am at my implementation at this point. If I want more feedback, I'll provide it. So we'll get out of Lazy Vim or Neovim really quick, and I'm going to go right back in, and I'm going to check that startup time just like we did with everybody else's. So we do a PH, and it takes me right to the Lazy main page, and it tells me that I've got 29 plugins. In my Blazingly Fast video, I had 27, so I've added a few things. So I would expect my startup time to be a little slower than what it was. And if I go to the profile section, I'm at 46.9 milliseconds. Again, under that 100 milliseconds, so I'm really happy with that. Now, what I tend to do is when I'm playing with this thing, also I've noticed across all the distros, it doesn't matter which one we're talking about, you will get different startup times, and you'll notice that's over 37 milliseconds. I'm not really sure what was going on with my computer and why that was as slow as it was, but I know that my computer is running at 52%. You can see that up here in the upper on my polybar. It's oscillating between 49 and 52% CPU while I'm running these videos. So I've noticed some variability on each distro on that first startup, but if I get out of it and go back in, it seems to quiesce. Now, I don't have any statistical proof on this, but I'm just saying from an observation standpoint, the first time all of them are slow because they're bootstrapping and they're loading everything. The second time seems to be the slowest startup, and I don't know if that's because there's some compiling going on or caching going on in the back end, but subsequent uses, you start to see that startup time getting a little bit faster. And then it kind of quiesces. So I would expect this environment to stay somewhere around 39 milliseconds. And if it starts to vary from that much, then I'm going to go start looking at the plugins to see if I've done something with the configuration. So we'll get out of this again, go right back in and do right back and see we're at 31 milliseconds. So you're seeing that a little bit of variability on the startup. I'm okay with that. I'm going to just go on and do other things at this point. So what I've done in my environment that's a little bit different that some of you have seen is, and when I look at my customization, I now have every plugin that I use is now can be enabled with the flag. So if we look at my plugin file and we look at, I've also split all of my plugins into areas that look a little more reasonable. So if I bring up, for example, if I do /nf, that's going to launch whatever Explorer I happen to have active at that time, but it always launches it for me on the right side of my screen. So I'm very interested in the plugins directory. So for those of you that have seen other videos that I did, you know that I had a big utilities file. It had everything in the one file. That was the easiest way for me to migrate from Packer to Lazy Vim, was to get everything into one place, figure out what it does, figure out how to use it, and then start moving things around. So never optimize too early. That's the key message there. With my environment, I'll do some quick navigation to show you some of the things that I've customized. So we'll just go right back to Neovim. In my environment, I can bring up and I can do a find file, and I'm going to look for LSP, and I'm going to see that I've got Mason installed. And we see the LSPs giving us some feedback, which is great. It tells me I've got an unused local variable. So if we go down to line 32, we can see get signs on line 35. And if I just change this to, change word to an underscore, we quiesce that noise. Here we've got a maximum number of 0 arguments, and it's receiving 1, so I'm just going to ignore that one for right now. But that's the way it is. But you notice I'm loading a lot of language servers, so I would expect my startup time to take longer to actually get this system bootstrapped. One of the things that I do is I use Explorer, so whatever Explorer that I happen to have loaded at any time, I expect to be able to do leader NF, which comes from my nerd tree days. So that would be nerd tree find file, so it's taking me right to that file, so it shows me where it is in my plugins. So for those of you who've seen some of my other videos, you know that when I used Lazy, I had everything in a single file. There was a file called utilities. That was the easiest way for me to transition from Packer to Lazy, is I put everything in one place so I could find it, so I could do massive scan replaces, and I was just dealing with a single file. Now I've kind of split things apart. So I mentioned finders as an example. So I've got a couple different finders in this particular file. So anytime I'm thinking about finders, I just jump into this file and I take a look at it, okay? So as I said earlier, in the TJ's Kickstart, I would go back and look at and compare what I'm doing with Telescope to what he's doing with Telescope, because maybe I can learn something from that. And maybe he's doing something with Telescope that will allow me to be more productive. So one of the things I'm very interested in is, okay, so I want to find out how my environment is doing with the Rust programming language. I've made some changes to the way I install language server protocols and some tree setter things. So I want to see how I'm doing. Where am I? Does it work? Do I need to make more changes? So I'm going to use the same technique I did with Starter Kit. And so we're going to do a rm-rf sample, and then we'll do a cargo new sample, and we'll navigate to sample. Okay, and we're going to do a tree command. We have a main file, great. So what we're expecting is to see what happens when I load my environment with my environment, see what happens. Did it do anything? Okay, don't see anything on the screen, which is maybe okay. I'll go into Mason. This is what we did with TJ's. We go into Mason, and I've got the Rust analyzer loaded. Okay, that was by default, so that's fine. Now we're going to do a find file, and we're going to do those same keystrokes, and we're going to go into Rust, and we're going to see if Fidget starts telling us something about diagnostics. Hey, there it goes. Okay, so for me to convert from Packer to LazyVim and to get the benefit of having LSP info, having Rust attached to this buffer, the transition was very simple. I actually deleted all my personal work on language server protocols and the debugger adapter, and I started over just to see how fast it was to do it. And the experience I had was very pleasing. So, you know, hats off to the Lazy Starter Kit, Kickstart Starter Kit, because I learned a lot from these things. Next, I'm going after debug adapter. I'm going after TJ's work to see what he's doing there, to see how I can get that debugger plugged back into my environment, because I want it to just work, and I don't want to spend a lot of time messing with those things. So really good work these other guys have done, and it's really helped me to get to the point where I can be more productive. So what you noticed, or may not have noticed, was I had the debug adapters, not the debug adapters, I had the language protocol working for Lua. I also had it working, I now have it running for Rust, which means with all the other languages that I'm using, I'll play with, you know, the C programming language. And just see what happens. So we've got a test file. What's in there? Test.c. Okay, so we have the hello world. Okay, so we expect, hopefully we would get some syntax highlighting. We're expecting that to work because of tree setter. So we expect that to work. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to go into the file, and we're going to go right into test.c about LSP info. And we've got a client attached. So this for me was really cool, that I could start getting language servers attached, and I didn't have to do a lot of work. So if you notice, I have a lot of languages that I have to use on in my daily work. So okay, so we hopped into a file with YAML, and same thing. I'm just going through the motions of, you know, did I get a language server loaded? Sure enough, I got a language server loaded. So by default, I do not have which key enabled in my environment, but if I wanted to turn it on, I'm just going to do a really quick grep, and I'm going to look for which key, and I find the customization. That's exactly the line I was after. So it goes right to that file, right to that line, and I'm going to change what's on line 71. I'm going to change that flag from false to true. Get out of Neovim and go right back in. Okay, so it's cloning it. That's expected behavior. Now it's done. Quit. Notice I did not exit Neovim and which key is active. It's just amazing what LazyVim is doing in the background when you're changing your plugins, when you're changing the environment. Some of those things are automatically hot right away. It's been very satisfying for me to use Lazy, to learn from that package manager, to learn from Neovim startup. Learn from Neovim Kickstart. So between those two packages, I've learned a lot, and I feel I'm on a path to creating a development environment that's going to allow me to be extremely productive with the kinds of activities that I need to use my Neovim environment for. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. Remember, this is a 7-part video series where I'm covering different Neovim installations. Give me a like, give me a subscribe. I've got a new microphone, so I'd like to get feedback on whether the audio quality is improving. Thanks again for watching. This is Traap. I'm out. May God bless you.